Most gardeners treat their yards like battlefields, spending weekends fighting weeds, pests, and soil depletion. Then wonder why the garden feels like a second job they didn't apply for. You're watering daily because plants wilt, spraying monthly because monocultures attract pests, and amending constantly because soil stays depleted. Meanwhile, traditional Japanese food gardens have produced continuous harvests for families through observation-based design that prevents these problems from appearing in the first place. Here's what most people miss. The issue isn't that you need better products or more time. It's that conventional gardening creates dependency on intervention, while Japanese approaches create ecosystems that regulate themselves through strategic plant relationships, soil-building processes, and passive water systems embedded into the garden structure from day one. Here's what most people miss about why gardens become weekend-destroying money pits. Western industrial agriculture taught you to treat your yard like a war zone, where you're the general fighting nature. You plant monocultures because that's what garden centers sell, which creates pest magnets that require spraying. You leave soil bare between crops because that's how commercial farms look, which invites every weed seed within 50 feet and demands weekend weeding sessions. You water shallowly every day because plants wilt in afternoon heat, which trains roots to stay weak and creates daily irrigation dependency. Think about it. You're creating the problems with design choices, then buying products and sacrificing time fighting symptoms you built into the system. Japanese gardeners figured out 400 years ago that this approach is backwards. The goal isn't better intervention. It's designing systems where intervention becomes unnecessary because the garden regulates itself through observation-based relationships between plants, soil, water, and insects. Kawakami Tetsuro, who documented traditional Japanese food gardens in the 1940s, recorded families producing year-round harvests from 200 square feet with monthly maintenance sessions, not daily battles. The fundamental difference is philosophical. Western conventional gardening operates on domination thinking: control, eliminate, replace. See a pest? Spray it. Soil depleted? Add synthetic fertilizer. Plants struggling? Rip them out. Buy new ones. This creates dependency where the garden needs you constantly because the design prevents self-regulation. Japanese traditional approaches operate on partnership thinking: observe, support, guide. See a pest? Ask what predator is missing and plant to attract it. Soil depleted? Ask what living processes build fertility and integrate them. Plants struggling? Ask what companion relationship they need and provide it. This creates autonomy, where the garden becomes more self-sufficient over time because design builds biological resilience instead of chemical dependency. But here's the reality. This isn't abstract philosophy. It translates into specific mechanisms refined through centuries of feeding families from small spaces with minimal external inputs. Hack 1. Plant polycultures instead of monocultures, which means growing 3 to 5 different species in the same bed. Lettuce with carrots, with radishes, with herbs, to fragment pest populations. Most insects are specialists, targeting one plant family. A cabbage moth finding a monoculture cabbage bed lays 200 eggs and creates an infestation. That same moth finding scattered cabbage plants among tomatoes, beans, and marigolds lays 15 eggs and moves on, because scattered reward isn't worth the effort. Polycultures reduce pest pressure 60 to 80% without spraying, which means you eliminate weekly pest patrol and monthly pesticide purchases just by mixing species. Hack 2. Use living ground covers as permanent mulch instead of buying wood chips or straw annually. Plant low-growing spreaders like clover, thyme, or sweet alyssum between food crops. These living mulches shade out weed seeds, retain soil moisture, and many fix nitrogen or attract beneficial insects while performing ground cover function. A white clover ground cover eliminates 90% of weed pressure, reduces watering frequency by half, and feeds neighboring plants with nitrogen, all for a $3 seed packet that reseeds itself annually. You've replaced 3 separate chores with one planting. Hack 3. Integrate nitrogen-fixing plants throughout the garden, which means beans, peas, clover, and vetch with root nodules that convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available forms. When you interplant these among heavy feeders like tomatoes, squash, or brassicas, you're building fertility in place instead of buying and applying fertilizer every month. Plant bush beans between tomato seedlings. The beans mature in 55 days and feed nitrogen to soil while tomatoes are still small. When you pull the beans, leave roots in place. They release nitrogen stores directly to tomato roots. This eliminates fertilizer purchases and reduces labor because feeding happens passively through biological processes you've designed into the structure. Now this is the game changer. Hack 4. Use shade layers strategically so tall crops like corn or trellised beans create shade that benefits heat-sensitive crops like lettuce, spinach, and cilantro underneath during summer months when these greens normally bolt. In traditional Japanese gardens documented by Tetsuro, this vertical layering serves multiple functions simultaneously. The tall crop produces food. Its shade extends the production window for understory crops that would fail in full sun. The layered canopy reduces soil evaporation while creating microclimates supporting diverse species in compact space. Plant lettuce on the north side of your tomato row, and it produces through July instead of bolting in May, giving you 8 additional weeks of harvest from the same square footage. Hack 5. Companion plant for pest management, using strategic scent masking and trap cropping. Marigolds release compounds through roots that repel nematodes and aphids. Basil, planted near tomatoes, confuses tomato hornworms with aromatic interference. Nasturtiums act as sacrificial trap crops. Aphids prefer them over everything else, so they concentrate on nasturtiums instead of spreading across food plants, and you simply pull infested nasturtiums weekly rather than spraying the entire garden. And here's the part nobody tells you. These relationships eliminate pest problems through design before they require intervention. Hack 6. Install perennial herbs as garden infrastructure, which means rosemary, thyme, oregano, sage, and lavender that establish once and produce for years while attracting pollinators, repelling certain pests, and requiring almost zero maintenance. They function as biological anchors in Japanese garden design, permanent fixtures that support annual crop rotations around them. A single rosemary plant costs $4, lives 10 years, and provides continuous pest deterrent plus culinary harvest while you rotate tomatoes, beans, and greens around it season after season. Here's the real secret about vertical space. Japanese gardens use it as a production multiplier, not decoration. Hack 7. Trellis vining crops to create shade infrastructure where cucumbers, beans, and peas, grown vertically on simple bamboo or wire structures, produce 3 times more per square foot than sprawling on ground. And the shade they cast becomes functional space for cool season crops underneath. You're not just saving horizontal space with vertical growing. You're creating microclimates that allow temperature-sensitive plants to coexist in the same bed, extending your production calendar without adding square footage. Hack 8. Stack containers for balcony polycultures if you're working with limited space or HOA restrictions. Vertical container arrangements mimic the layering principle. Tall pots with beans or tomatoes create shade for medium pots with lettuce, which shade small pots with herbs. You've built a 3-layer ecosystem in 4 square feet of balcony space, producing more variety with less watering, because stacked arrangement reduces evaporation from lower containers. Hack 9. Use edge planting to create beneficial microclimates by exploiting the fact that bed perimeters experience different conditions than centers. More sun exposure on south edges, more shade on north edges, wind protection along fences or walls. Japanese gardeners position heat lovers against south-facing walls, where reflected warmth extends the season by 2 to 3 weeks, and shade-tolerant crops along north edges, where they're protected from intense afternoon sun. This microplacement eliminates failures from plants in wrong conditions and maximizes production from every linear foot of bed space. Hack 10. Install pathway materials that function as water storage instead of bare dirt paths that compact and shed water. Use wood chips, straw, or gravel that absorb rainfall and slowly release it to adjacent bed edges over days. Japanese courtyard gardens use permeable pathways as passive irrigation. Rainfall that would run off hard surfaces gets captured in pathway materials and wicks laterally into planting beds, which reduces supplemental watering frequency by 30 to 40% just through strategic surface choices. Hack 11. Place rocks for thermal mass and moisture collection, which means stones absorb heat during day and radiate it at night, moderating temperature swings for nearby plants and extending the season at both ends. They also provide surfaces for dew condensation, where water vapor condenses on cool stone surfaces overnight and drips into surrounding soil, providing passive irrigation in dry climates. A ring of fist-sized stones around heat-loving plants like peppers or basil adds 2 weeks to either end of the production window and reduces watering needs during establishment. Think about it. You've installed a passive climate regulation system for the cost of collecting stones. Hack 12. Create vertical polyculture towers in containers by stacking a tomato cage, planting pole beans or peas to climb it, sowing lettuce or spinach around the base, and adding trailing nasturtiums at the edge. You've built a 4-species ecosystem in one large pot, where climbers use vertical space, greens use the shaded base, and nasturtiums cascade over the edge while attracting aphids away from everything else. This is the container equivalent of Japanese forest garden layering compressed into 3 square feet. Picture a traditional Japanese food garden that Tetsuro documented in post-war Kyoto, 200 square feet, producing year-round food for a family through 7 distinct layers of production, stacked vertically instead of spread horizontally. Tall fruit trees or trellised vines form the canopy at 8 to 12 feet. Dwarf fruit trees or large shrubs create a subcanopy at 5 to 8 feet. Perennial herbs and small shrubs fill the shrub layer at 2 to 5 feet. Herbaceous perennials and annual vegetables occupy the herb layer at ground to 2 feet. Ground covers spread across the soil surface at 0 to 6 inches. Root crops develop underground from 6 to 24 inches deep. And climbing vines weave through the vertical structure using existing plants as support. Every cubic foot of airspace is productive, not just the ground plane. Western gardens typically use 1 layer, the herb layer, leaving 6 layers of potential production completely empty. Japanese gardens fill all 7, which is why they produce 4 to 5 times more food per square foot while requiring less maintenance because the layered diversity creates pest resistance and nutrient cycling that monocultures can't match. Now here's the companion relationship blueprint that makes this system work. The 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash planted together, is the teaching example Japanese and indigenous American gardeners have used for centuries to demonstrate functional polyculture. Corn provides vertical structure reaching 6 to 8 feet tall. Beans climb the corn stalks and fix nitrogen in soil through root nodules. Squash spreads along ground as living mulch, shading out weeds and retaining moisture while its spiny leaves deter raccoons and other pests. Each plant serves the others. The corn supports beans physically. The beans feed corn and squash chemically through nitrogen fixation that releases 50 to 80 pounds per acre annually. The squash protects all 3 by controlling the soil environment and preventing weed competition. When you plant these together in one bed, you eliminate the need for stakes, fertilizer, mulch, weeding, and pest barriers. 5 separate interventions replaced by 1 strategic planting. But here's what most people miss. The 3 sisters isn't a specific recipe to memorize. It's a design pattern showing how to combine plants based on complementary functions that you can apply anywhere. Tomatoes provide vertical structure for basil underneath. Basil repels aphids and hornworms through aromatic compounds while benefiting from tomato shade during peak summer heat when basil normally wilts in full sun. Plant this combination and you've eliminated 2 pest problems and extended basil production by 6 weeks. Carrots and onions planted in alternating rows confuse carrot flies and onion maggots through scent masking. Both pests rely on smell to locate host plants, and mixed scents disorient them enough to reduce infestation by 70% without spraying. Cabbage family plants surrounded by aromatic herbs like dill, chamomile, and coriander attract beneficial wasps that parasitize cabbage moth larvae, providing biological pest control that costs nothing and requires zero intervention once established. These aren't random tips. Each combination eliminates specific maintenance tasks through strategic relationship design. Hack 13 for modern suburban contexts. If you're working under HOA restrictions prohibiting visible food gardens, use edible landscaping that looks ornamental but produces food. Blueberry bushes function as hedge material, producing 5 to 10 pounds per plant annually. Thornless blackberries train along fences, yielding 8 to 12 pounds per 10 feet. Fruit trees espalier flat against walls in decorative patterns. Lettuce varieties with burgundy or bronze leaves work as bedding plants. Scarlet runner beans on decorative trellises pass as flowering vines. You're growing food in plain sight, disguised as ornamental landscaping, which gives you production without violating property restrictions. Hack 14 for balcony contexts. Vertical wall planters or pocket systems let you grow 30 to 40 plants in the footprint of a single chair by utilizing wall space instead of floor space. Plant strawberries, herbs, and leafy greens in pockets, and you've created a productive vertical garden that fits balcony regulations while producing daily harvests from less than 6 square feet. But here's the reality about soil and water. Western gardens treat these as inputs you add from outside. Japanese gardens treat them as outputs you build from inside through embedded biological processes. Hack 15. Use chop and drop instead of hauling materials, which means when plants finish producing, cut them at ground level and leave all organic matter in place. The roots decompose underground, creating channels for air and water while feeding soil biology. The tops decompose on surface as mulch, suppressing weeds and building humus. You've eliminated the labor of hauling debris away, the cost of buying compost or amendments, and the need for separate mulching. 3 tasks replaced by 1 strategic cut. Hack 16. Apply mulch in 4-inch depths using diverse materials layered like forest floor composition. Wood chips at bottom for long-term structure. Straw or leaves in middle for moisture retention. Fresh grass clippings or compost on top for nutrient release. This layered approach provides continuous nutrient release and weed suppression while maintaining soil temperature stability. A single 4-inch application lasts 8 to 12 months and reduces weeding by 95%. Hack 17. Water deeply and infrequently instead of shallowly and daily, which means most gardeners water for 10 minutes every day, keeping the top 2 inches moist, but training roots to stay shallow, making plants dependent on constant irrigation and vulnerable to stress. Japanese approach. Water until soil is saturated to 8 to 12 inches deep, then wait until the top 2 inches dry before watering again. This typically means watering once every 5 to 7 days instead of daily. Deep watering forces roots to grow deep, accessing moisture reserves that shallow watering never reaches, which means plants become drought-tolerant and you've reduced watering frequency by 80% while improving plant resilience. Hack 18. Create swales or shallow depressions along contour lines to capture and hold rainfall. Which means a swale is just a level ditch running perpendicular to slope where water flowing downhill hits the swale, slows down, and soaks in instead of running off. In a Phoenix suburb, a homeowner installed 3 6-inch deep swales across a sloped backyard and reduced irrigation needs by 60%, because rainfall that previously sheeted off the property now infiltrates where plants can access it. This is passive water harvesting. You dig once, and the landscape captures water automatically for years. Hack 19. Use stone arrangements for dew collection in dry climates, where flat stones placed throughout the garden provide surfaces where nighttime temperature drops cause atmospheric moisture to condense into water droplets that drip into surrounding soil. In areas with low rainfall but high humidity, this passive collection can provide 10 to 20% of plant water needs during establishment without turning on a hose. Hacks 20 through 25 cover integrated seed saving that eliminates annual seed purchases. Let the best performing plants go to seed. Collect and store seeds from tomatoes, beans, lettuce, herbs, and any open pollinated varieties. Scatter saved seeds in appropriate seasons and let volunteer plants fill gaps. Many crops like lettuce, dill, cilantro, and arugula will self-sow if you let a few plants bolt, creating continuous production without replanting. This transitions you from seed dependency to seed autonomy over 2 to 3 seasons. Hacks 26 through 30 focus on seasonal observation instead of calendar planting, which means Japanese gardeners watch soil temperature, observe when specific indicator plants leaf out, and plant based on actual conditions rather than arbitrary dates. When dandelions bloom, soil is warm enough for peas at 45 degrees. When lilacs flower, corn can go in at 60 degrees. These natural indicators are more reliable than calendar dates because they respond to the same environmental cues your crops need, reducing planting failures from mistimed sowings. Here's what the numbers actually look like. Western garden maintenance averages 8 hours per week during growing season. 2 hours watering, 2 hours weeding, 1 hour pest management, 1 hour fertilizing or amending, 2 hours harvesting and replanting. That's 32 hours monthly, 192 hours from April through September. Japanese design approach reduces this to 2 hours monthly once established. 30 minutes of observation walks, 30 minutes of strategic harvest, 30 minutes of chop and drop maintenance, 30 minutes of seasonal adjustments. The difference is 30 hours monthly returned to your life. Over a 6-month growing season, that's 180 hours, the equivalent of 4.5 full work weeks you've reclaimed by designing prevention instead of practicing intervention. Annual spending comparison shows the cost transformation. Western approach: $300 to $600 on amendments and fertilizers. $100 to $200 on pest control products, $50 to $100 on seeds purchased annually, $100 to $200 on mulch and soil inputs, $50 on replacement plants for failures. Total, $600 to $1,150 yearly. Japanese approach: $50 to $100 on initial perennial plantings and seed stock, $20 to $40 on tool maintenance, $30 on supplemental mulch materials. Total, $100 to $170 yearly after establishment year. The savings, $500 to $980 annually, pays for the initial transition and generates positive return by year 2. Implementation tiers give you a realistic roadmap. Beginner level: start with 8 to 10 foundational hacks. Plant living ground covers in bed gaps. Add nitrogen fixers between heavy feeders. Install basic companion combinations like tomatoes with basil and marigolds. Use chop and drop instead of hauling debris. Switch to deep, infrequent watering. These 5 changes alone cut maintenance by 40% and cost under $50 to implement. Intermediate level: add 12 to 15 spatial and biological hacks. Install vertical trellises. Create edge microclimates. Build layered container polycultures. Start seed saving from best performers. Expand companion diversity. Add perennial herbs as infrastructure. This level cuts maintenance another 30% and moves you toward input independence. Advanced level: full ecosystem design using all 50 hacks. 7-layer vertical production. Complete polyculture beds. Passive water harvesting. Seasonal observation-based planting. Volunteer self-sowing systems. At this level, you're managing an ecosystem that largely runs itself, requiring only guidance and seasonal adjustment. Timeline reality matters. First season, you're learning patterns, which combinations work in your specific conditions, how your soil responds, what pests appear when. Expect 50% maintenance reduction as you implement beginner hacks, but still learning observation skills. Second season, the garden starts self-regulating. Ground covers are established, companions are proven, deep-rooted plants access moisture reserves, beneficial insects have colonized. Maintenance drops to 20 to 30% of original time. Third season, you're mostly observing. The ecosystem is mature, plants self-sow, pest-predator balance is stable, soil biology is active. You've transitioned from manager to steward, and the garden produces abundance with minimal intervention because the design does the work. Instead of spending every weekend watering, weeding, and fighting pests, you're taking monthly observation walks and harvesting abundance. Instead of buying amendments, seeds, and pest control products yearly, you're saving seeds, building soil through living processes, and watching predator insects handle pest populations. Instead of treating your garden like a battlefield requiring constant vigilance, you're partnering with an ecosystem that regulates itself through relationships you've designed into the structure. Instead of exhaustion and expense, you've created a system that gives time back while producing more food than intervention-based approaches ever could. Instead of dependency on garden centers and product cycles, you've built autonomy through observation and biological relationships that strengthen yearly. You're not abandoning your garden. You're graduating from battlefield general to ecosystem designer. This works in Phoenix suburbs where swales capture monsoon rains, in Brooklyn balconies where vertical containers create layered polycultures, in Seattle backyards where year-round mild temperatures support continuous production, and in Minneapolis where season extension and deep mulching push boundaries. The principles scale because they're based on observation and relationships, not products and intervention. 4 centuries of Japanese gardeners prove this approach, feeding families from small spaces with minimal external inputs. The 50 hacks aren't random tips. They're system components that prevent problems through strategic design, build fertility through embedded biological processes, and reduce labor by creating self-regulation. This week, identify your single highest maintenance task. Is it daily watering? Implement deep watering intervals and living mulch. Is it weekly weeding? Install ground covers and 4-inch mulch layers. Is it monthly pest battles? Add companion planting and beneficial insect habitat. Pick 3 hacks from the Spatial Design Cluster and implement them in one bed as your learning laboratory. Watch what happens when you design relationships instead of managing problems. Track the time saved. Notice how the ecosystem starts doing work you used to do manually. 4 centuries of refinement taught Japanese gardeners this truth. Observation beats intervention every time. Relationships beat inputs always. And design beats domination permanently. Your garden doesn't need a manager fighting endless battles. It needs a designer who sets up functional relationships, then steps back and lets biology handle the details. Your weekends are waiting. Your wallet is waiting. The garden that runs itself is waiting for you to stop fighting and start designing.